Hi, welcome to some maths. Today I'm going to go through simple addition of fractions, and before I do that I'll just go through and revise what we did last time, which was how to multiply fractions. So let's just start and explain what a fraction is. So if I say this little rectangle here is 1, so that's equal to 1. Now if I divide that into two sections, okay, each section is a half of that 1. So that is showing me that half plus a half is equal to 1. Take that same rectangle again, and if I divide this rectangle up into three pieces, okay, that rectangle is still equal to 1, which is equal to 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. Okay, so now if we want to multiply those two fractions together, so times is multiply. So we've got 1/2 times 1/3. So when we draw up a shape, let's draw up a square, and if we want to divide that square in half, right, so we've got two sections, so we've got a half plus a half, right? That's dividing it rectangle up into two sections. Now let's say we want to divide it into thirds as well, going the other way. So we'll draw a line down here and a line down here. So we've got two different diagrams there. We've got looking that way a half twice, and looking down that way we've got thirds. So what that essentially is asking is, what is a half of a third? So if you look at this first third here, right, that's 1/3, which is that whole section here. So this is 1/3. I shade that in, right, and then we take a line through here and cut it in half. A half of that third is just one of these sections. So that little square there is a half of a third. So that fairly simply then shows you, what have we got? How many of those half thirds do we have? How many half of a thirds do we have in that whole square? Now what was that whole square? It was equal to 1, right? So what we had was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 of those small squares are equal to 1. So that is equal to, 1 is equal to 6 times 1 part in 6. Okay, so that is multiplying fractions. Now the important thing there is to notice, when you're multiplying fractions, you need to work out, again, a fraction of what? A fraction of 1. You need to look at what you're doing, and you say, okay, we've got a half of something back up here, that is 1, so a half is smaller than 1. Now if we look at a third, which is 3 parts in 1, it's also smaller than 1, and you can see very clearly there that a third is smaller than a half. So that's a revision of your multiplying fractions. Now let's go into adding fractions. Let's now add one of these, right? So we'll add 1/2, which is to 1/3. So we'll write that down as 1/2 plus 1/3. And what does that equal? Now, fractions are just things. A half is a thing, and a third is a different thing. Now, in this example, let's say a half was an orange and a third was an apple. Call it the same thing. You can't add oranges to apples. But if we had 2/3, right, which if we look at over here, if we had 2/3, 1/3 plus a second third, 1/3, okay, you can't see that there, if we say 1/3 plus 1/3, that is equal to 2/3. Right, 1/3 plus another third is equal to 2 parts in 3. And of course, if we added another third to that, what would that be? How many thirds would we have if we had those 2 plus 1? So 2 plus 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. So that is all equal to 1. Now, when we're adding up halves to thirds, we can't because they're not the same. So let's have a look at what a half is equal to. So if we look over here, this section here in the multiply, that was half of that block. Now in that block, how many little squares do we have in that block? Right, so the answer to that is 3 small squares in that block. And how much was each of those small squares? Remember? It was 1/6. So a half, there's another way we can write a half is 3 parts in 6. So let's have a look at, so you agree that's a half is 3 parts in 6. Now what is a third? Now a third, if we look at it going the other way, going up, that was the third. And it was how many sixths? 2 of them. So 1/3 is 2 parts in 6. Now we need to find out how many 6 do we have when we add these 2 plus these 3. Now be careful here because that one there we're counting twice. So let's count this one as well. So now we've got, right, only 1 block left over. So out of the 6 blocks, 1 left over, we have 2. 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Okay, now think about, does that make sense? Is adding a half plus a third, does that give you 5/6? Is that correct? Now think about it, does it make sense? If we take this block plus that block, right, this block is a half, this is smaller than a half. If we add them up, the answer is going to be less than 1. So is that less than 1? 5 parts in 6, a little bit left over. So it's less than 1. Is it bigger than a half? Yes, it's bigger than a half. And it's bigger than a third. So yes, that answer looks like it makes sense. So there we have working out how to add fractions. So this is an explanation of plus, adding, fractions. Okay, now let's see if you can add. The next one for you to work out for yourself is, let's take a third and add that to a quarter and find out what that is equal to. So there's your homework exercise now from here. Okay, enjoy. Go through this, see if you can now work this out and do this by yourself. So don't look at this, do an example of multiply, do that, and the next stage of course is, once you learn how to do this, you need to learn how to teach this to someone else. You haven't learnt how to do something until you can teach that to somebody else. So that's the whole principle. And if you haven't mastered this, don't go on to anything more difficult. Do this first, do this completely, master this. Mastery is, you can do it, you can do a different example, you can teach it to somebody else. Once you've got that far, you've mastered it. You need to master fractions. Thank you for listening.